My name is John Schinnerer. This is the Top 10 Frequently Asked Questions webinar. In a second, I will share my screen and basically just go through a bunch of slides pretty darn fast. Because if you figure the time we have, that's like a minute and a half per slide, and I want to leave a little time for follow-up after I run through them. So bear with me just a second, and I will be sharing my screen. And, whoops, wrong button. Okay, here we go. Okay, you should be seeing the blue sheet, and then here we go. So, first slide. Okay, so this is a quick tour of frequently asked questions. I pulled out 10 of the ones that have been coming around the most in my experience and that of some of my colleagues teaching our online courses and doing other training and consulting work over about 6 years. So these are certainly not the only top 10 questions. They're just the ones that I picked. And these are only partial answers. It's a slide per question. There's a lot more that can be said. I'm willing to probably go to a breakout room for a bit afterwards if people want. And of course, there's other common questions. So it's just a place to start. So that's me, John Schinnerer, Cultural and Ecological Whole Systems Designer, founding member of the Sociocracy Consulting Group. There's my email and our website. And I just want to preface the questions and responses with this, which is about the answers. The first two words may often be, that depends, because context really matters a lot. We're working with complex living systems. We're working with groups of human beings. So it gets complicated, it gets messy, and what a useful response is depends a lot on the situation at hand. Also, just to point out that the answers here in terms of sociocracy are based primarily on the Sociocratic circle method implementation. And they also draw on my own experience, training, et cetera, with a whole number of things listed there that I won't say all of them. And so I'm speaking from more than just, the SCM implementation. I'll be bringing in other aspects of human behavior and stuff like that. Okay, so let's get started. This is always an interesting one to me. What is the maximum circle size? And each of these questions, it sometimes comes in different forms. I've just picked a certain form to put in the text that we'll focus on. So there's variations of this question. How big can a circle be? What's the biggest circle we should have? So there is no fixed or standard answer to that. This is one of those questions where the answer starts with, that depends. What is the circle doing? What is its domain? What are its aims? What is its products or services that it's putting out in the world? And so on and on. So I just wanted to make 2 points on this question. One is an example of how a large circle can function just fine as a policy-making entity given its particular situation. And the example I'll use is, let's say you have 50 people, and this is a customer service call center. They all sit in cubicles and they answer phones from customers about a particular product or service. The one I've actually seen live in person is T-Mobile cell phone service, customer service office. Okay, so the work that they do is very uniform. They all have the same essential job, and most of what they do is quite routine. There's not a lot of variability. They have a specific product that they're supporting, and they, often used to have a paper manual, and nowadays they have a computer application that shows them kind of what the answers are. Here's the question, what's the answer I can give this client? What's the adjustment I can help them with? So for a circle like that, 50 people is not a problem because their work is so uniform and relatively routine. There's probably not going to be a lot of policy changes that they need to make. So they might just meet maybe once a quarter. and see if there's anything really that needs to change, or if there's something happening elsewhere in the organization that they need to respond to. And since they're all familiar with a very similar job, there's not going to be a whole lot of, difference of opinion when it's that simple. So then in the bigger picture, part of the response is that the point of a circle is to meet and make policy to guide their work. So what really matters is that everyone who's doing that work and is affected is there to provide their input and provide their feedback. That's much more important than any sort of arbitrary statement of what size makes for a good circle or how big should a circle be. I'll also add that I've gotten people asking, well, this research shows a team size of 5 to 7 is optimal, or this other research shows that a group of 8 to 12 is perfect for this thing or that thing. So the point is, those are different contexts. So those sizes are serving some purpose that may not be the same as a circle meeting making policy to guide the work. So those may be very useful things to know, but they may not be relevant to the context we're talking about. Okay, now we're going to speed it up. How does sociocracy handle conflict? This is the broad form of the question, and that depends. What type of conflict? What domain is it in? Just one circle? Is it affecting the whole organization? And so on. So part of the response is be sure you have a conflict resolution policy. And you can use any conflict resolution tools, approaches, methodologies that your group consents to try as part of that policy. But just make sure you have a policy. This is something to do when everybody is calm and relaxed and ahead of time before you have a conflict, because it's really difficult to make this policy when you have a conflict going. Excuse me. You can start with internal resources, the skills and so on that you have within your organization, and by all means be prepared to go to external resources if you need to. It's nice to have a progression of steps. Some things can be resolved quickly and easily, maybe just the two people in conflict and someone to observe or guide their conversation, and then you may need to escalate from there. You may need to have a whole circle working on a conflict issue. You may need to have external support from arbitrators, mediators, those types of expertise. And of course, be aware that there's no policy that's proof against human behavior, so you have to think about, what will the possible consequences be if there is a conflict and someone just decides to ignore the policies and not follow it. What happens then? And what is your plan B for dealing with that? Okay, next one. Sometimes related, what if one person is always objecting, or you have that difficult person, as people sometimes say? So if you've got one person consistently objecting to multiple proposals, meeting after meeting, consistently, and those objections can't be resolved, then that person may be out of alignment with the aims of the circle. And there's two things to consider. They may be the person who really sees something that everyone else is missing. Maybe there's what we call groupthink happening, and the whole circle is really attached to a certain perspective, and they're making a mistake. And this person is really trying to alert them to the fact that they're making a mistake. And the other, so that's one possibility. The other possibility is this person may be in the wrong circle or the wrong role, and they might do well in some other circle or role. So one thing to consider is, do they fit better somewhere else than where they are now? And if they don't, then the odds are that they are in the wrong organization, because they're consistently out of alignment with what the group is trying to do and how it's trying to do it. So often the feedback, the consistent feedback to this person of being out of alignment, and they will depart, they will leave because they realize this isn't the place for me. This isn't what I'm trying to do or what I want to do. If they don't leave, then they may need to be removed from the circle, because at some point they'll be interfering with everybody else getting things done. So that takes us to a related question. This is a charged question for a lot of people. How is someone removed from a circle? So the question I'm answering is how, which is actually pretty straightforward in terms of process. It's a proposal like any other proposal, that someone be removed from a circle. The usual process for consent is used. You have your clarifying questions rounds, you have your reaction rounds. At some point you have a consent round. The one difference is that the person proposed for removal participates in the questions, they participate in the reactions, they can speak their piece, but they don't have the power to object. There has to be consent from everyone else, but not from the person proposed to be removed, obviously because your system would then be stuck with nowhere to go. The person refuses to consent to leave, and everybody else thinks they should leave, and then what do you do? So they don't have consent. And you normally want to have the whole conflict resolution process happen first. The person should be getting feedback, ideally supportive feedback, about what's going on, and all that should happen. The removal of someone is normally going to be a last resort. The last thing you do if feedback and conflict resolution don't get you back in enough alignment to be effective. Okay, and of course that's that last part that we get into. You might want to go look at the presentation I did on neuroscience and psychology and safety and bravery that is relevant to this kind of thing. How do we keep a safe space for something like this to happen? But this is the how. Okay, so moving on. Why do we have double linking? Meaning two people who are selected, one by each circle, to be a member of the other circle. So basically, the part of the Sociocratic circle method that's built on cybernetics and systems theory ideas, there's something called circular feedback. So the double linking is implementing that, building it into the structure of the organization. Circular feedback just means that some action happens that generates information, and the information comes back around to inform what happens next or what is done next. Think about the heating system in your house. It's a very simple example of circular feedback. If it's too cold, we turn the heater on, it warms up. It gets warm enough, we turn the heater off, and so on and so forth to keep the correct temperature. So circular feedback is basically to help a system like a human organization balance itself, steer itself, guide itself more effectively than if there's only one directional information flow, or if some parts of the organization are not getting the information they need to respond appropriately. So the double link is how we provide that in the organization. And it's probably one of the most unique, maybe the only truly unique piece in this organizational system compared to a lot of other systems out there. Okay, so this one's always interesting to me. People ask, well, how come there's no, where do we have discussion? How come there's no discussion? So, first of all, to discuss in English means to examine, to investigate, and literally, if you look at the etymology, the origins of the word, to shake apart, to take apart or shake apart. So there is absolutely discussion in Sociocratic meetings. Every process in a circle meeting involves some discussion. I think the reason people ask this question is because the form of the discussion, the way we have the discussion, the process of the discussion is different than most of us are used to calling discussion, right? So we may listen to each other more carefully. We may take turns when we're speaking, and so on. So all the basic circle processes involve this discussion defined as examining, investigating, and taking apart, shaking apart. Right? The consent decision process does it when there's a proposal to discuss. The election process does it when we need to fill a role. And the proposal generation process does it when we're trying to create a proposal together as a circle. So just consider that it's not that there's not discussion, it's that we do it in a different way. It's not the way that our default cultural discussion happens. and we claim that there's benefits to doing it this way. Okay, another top 10, policy and operations. What is the difference? It'll be a much bigger answer here, but my short one for now is that policy is what guides the work of the organization. It's what are the rules and regulations that we set up for ourselves to work the way we want to work, to be safe, to be harmonious, to be effective, to be productive, whatever those intentions are. So making policy is really about creating and maintaining the organization itself, organizing the work and guiding the work. And policy, as we know, is made by consent of those affected by the policy, and we use the foundational principles of equivalence and transparency. So then operations, that's actually creating the products and services that the organization puts out into the world. It's doing the work of the organization. Okay, so policy is creating the organization. Operations is doing the work that the organization does. And the operational work is guided by the policies, but it's managed by operational leaders. We'll get to that in a second, coming up soon. And they're chosen by consent. So choosing an operational leader is a policy decision to give authority to then operationally guide work. Okay, what is an objection? There's a number of ways this comes. Some people say, what's a legitimate objection or a valid objection? And that can get into a big philosophical thing. So I'm going to focus on just a few points here. Objections are ways that we identify risks to accomplishing our aims or to fulfilling the roles that we're in. Okay, so objections provide reasons why some proposal is contradictory to our aims or fails to move us toward our aims. Objection has to relate with our aims, what we're trying to do and why this proposal doesn't get us there or is contrary to getting us there. So we can always ask, well, how does this objection relate to our aims or to the roles that we're trying to fulfill? And ideally, objections will contain valuable information for improving a proposal. And keep in mind, this is something I noticed only over time, that if an objection may turn out to not be relevant to the current decision that we're working on, but it may actually still be valuable information in some way about the circle as a whole, about past policies or decisions, may inform future policies that we haven't even got to yet, or it might give us information about ourselves or our fellow circle members. So the value in an objection sometimes happens outside or beyond what we're actually working on at the moment. And a final important point, aims, aims, aims. We talk about aims. Someone is unmuted. Could you please mute? There may be different means, different approaches, different ways to accomplish the same aims. If an aim is somewhere we're going, there may be several roads to get there. And objections may also surface or identify that there's a difference in how to achieve our aims. We may find we're not disagreeing about the aims, we're disagreeing about how to get there. And that's an important thing to notice also. Okay, back to the operational piece. What is the operational leader role? I've found quite a bit of confusion around this, including in places where I thought it would be more obvious, like a typical business. So the operational leader is the manager role. It's basically equivalent to whatever the manager role is in that type of organization, right? There's all these different names: supervisors, coordinators, superintendents, directors of departments, directors of divisions, all these different names. So the operational leader is that role. They lead the operational work, managing tasks, priorities, resources, and so on. And it's so, for example, in a normal business that has managers in a hierarchical structure, if we're going to start implementing sociocracy, the initial operational leaders will probably be those same managers, because they're already in that role. That might change, but that's a way to think about why are they in that role, because they're already there. And they're going to behave differently now in making policy, because in policy meetings, what they bring is the perspective of the operational leader, the manager experience of what's happening. Other than that, they're just equivalent to everyone else. They have their power of consent, but they don't, in policy meetings, have any other special power or authority. Okay, and the next one here is their hierarchy in a sociocratic organization. I've run across people intermittently who have come for some reason to think that sociocracy is some kind of completely flat system, and it is and it isn't. So there is a hierarchy. The hierarchy is about organizing the work. So we organize work in circles from most general to most specific, and that creates an ordered set, a hierarchy. Okay, my example here, because I like to bicycle, is general work is if you're managing a whole bicycle factory. Very specific work is making all the different parts for the bicycle, or perhaps assembling the complete bicycles from all the parts. So that's where the hierarchy comes in. It's used for organizing work. It's not a hierarchy of one person or one circle having power over the policies or the work of another person or circle. So, and the operational hierarchy of the manager, the operations leader, that is a hierarchical situation that is by consent of the people managed. So they put a person in that role who they trust and know has the skills to do that job well. Okay, so there we have a fast tour of top 10, and let me see if I can end the screen share. No, my screen share is broken. My controls have vanished. Jerry, can you kill the screen share? Let's see. Okay, well, I just want to see who all is here and see if we have any questions on the questions. Ah, there we go. Thank you. If someone helped me out, thank you. Okay, let me just go to the chat to start with. I see a bunch of stuff in the chat. Mukunda asks, does it make sense to think that the level of proficiency of the members can impact the effective size? So I think this is about the circle size. And I would say yes. The more experienced everyone is, the more normal and automatic the sociocratic approach is. The faster a large group can process things, or the more successfully they will process things. So experience definitely helps, yes. How well people already know how to work the system, as it were. Okay, question about, whoops, sorry, lost my chat. Question about circular feedback from Voyager Room. Why would that not be possible via one person? There are obvious benefits to double linking, but single linking probably can fill that function too. Your comment, please. So my comment is, if you have one person in both of those roles, you're relying on that person to do two things at once, to hold two perspectives at once, or possibly three, or possibly four. So it's possible, but I suggest that it might be dangerous. It creates a situation where one person can very easily control a lot of information, and who hears what and who doesn't hear what, what's transferred, what's not transferred, what gets consent and what doesn't. And so I'll reiterate that I think in the Sociocratic circle method, the implementation of double links in most cases is like the truest or biggest innovation of the SCM. And there are going to be exceptions. There are exceptions that are very social, where there's so much feedback already happening that the formalization of it as a double link might not be necessary. For example, intentional communities, very small groups where everyone knows each other well. those kinds of situations. But be careful.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead. I saw you waving there frantically. Go ahead.
Yes, I agree with what you said, but I keep going back to thinking that originally sociocracy was designed for in-person organization where people spend the full working day together. And now we have more and more virtual teams that communicate and collaborate across organizational boundaries, across time zones. And very often they use communication and collaboration platforms where communication is transparent. So it's just simply different context now. Yeah.
Yeah. There can be more communication, but it still comes down to the human beings and what do we choose to share and not share? How transparent are we? So if there's two people responsible or more for specific sharings, specific types of information, then we are, in a system's terms, we're more likely to see dissonance, or more likely to see if there's a mismatch, we'll see it better. But thank you for that. Okay, let me just look at one more. So I'll go to the boardroom after this, and anyone who wants to go on with some of these questions in a breakout room, I'll do that. A very quick one I can do in less than a minute. L in Adelaide asks, would the operational leader be the delegate to the next higher circle? So yes, I was just talking about the generic situation of double linking. So the operational leader role is also one half of the double link. They're elected by a one circle to lead a subcircle, and then the subcircle elects a link back to the higher circle to complete the circular feedback. And with that, my clock says it is time for us to go and make space for the next person. Thank you everyone for your attention.